Have you ever walked away from someone who took your kindness for granted, only to hear they're still reeling from your absence? That's the secret strength of the empath's silent exit, a move so powerful it shakes the foundations of those who never truly saw you. Welcome to Jung's Psyche Hub, where we dive deep into the wisdom of Carl Jung to uncover the hidden truths of your soul. In this video, we're exploring why an empath's quiet departure isn't just a goodbye, it's a revolution through real-life stories, practical steps, and Carl Jung's timeless insights. You'll discover how to reclaim your energy, set boundaries, and step into your true power. So, stick around, because this is the moment you stop carrying the world's pain and start shining as your authentic self. Let's dive in. Imagine this. You're sitting in your car after a long day. Your heart heavy. Your mind racing. You've just spent hours listening to a friend vent about their toxic relationship, offering comfort, wiping their tears, and giving advice they'll probably ignore. You're exhausted, not just physically, but deep in your soul. Yet, you don't even notice how drained you are, because this is normal for you. This is what it means to be an empath, a person who feels the world's emotions so deeply, it's like carrying an invisible weight no one else can see. Welcome to the hidden burden of the empath, a burden that Carl Jung's psychology can help us understand and, ultimately, transform. So, what exactly is an empath? At its core, an empath is someone whose sensitivity to others' emotions runs so deep that they don't just understand feelings, they absorb them. When a coworker is stressed, you feel the knot in your stomach. When a family member is grieving, their sadness seeps into your bones. It's not just empathy. It's like you become a sponge for the world's pain. And while this gift makes you a natural healer, a confidant, a safe haven for others, it comes at a cost. That cost your own energy, your own peace, and sometimes your own identity. Let's meet Sarah, a 32-year-old graphic designer who's the textbook definition of an empath. Sarah's the one her friends call at 2 a.m. when their lives fall apart. She's the one who stays late at work to help a struggling colleague, even when her own deadlines are looming. She's the one who always says yes when her family needs her, even if it means canceling her own plans. Last week, Sarah spent an entire evening consoling her best friend, Lisa, who was heartbroken over a breakup. Sarah listened, hugged, and offered words of wisdom, all while suppressing her own exhaustion from a grueling day. By the time she got home, she collapsed on her couch, too tired to even eat dinner. But here's the kicker. Sarah didn't even question it. To her, this is just what she does. She carries others' pain because she can. This is where Carl Jung's wisdom comes in. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist who explored the depths of the human psyche, would say that Sarah's behavior is tied to what he called the shadow. The shadow is the part of ourselves we don't fully acknowledge, the hidden desires, fears, or needs we push down to fit in or be loved. For empaths like Sarah, the shadow often holds a deep, unspoken belief. If I carry your pain, you'll need me. If you need me, I'm valuable. This belief, rooted in childhood or past experiences, drives empaths to prioritize others' emotions over their own. It's why Sarah feels guilty saying no to Lisa, even when she's running on empty. It's why she feels like her worth depends on being useful. But here's the problem. This dynamic has no boundaries. Carl Jung taught us that without boundaries, the line between self and other becomes blurry. Empaths like Sarah don't just listen to pain, they merge with it. They take on the chaos, the grief, the anger of others, believing it's their role to fix it. Carl Jung called this a lack of individuation, the process of becoming a whole, distinct self. When you're an empath, your identity can get lost in the act of serving others. You become the therapist, the peacemaker, the emotional dumping ground, but rarely the one who's seen, heard, or valued for you. Let's go back to Sarah. One night, after another marathon phone call with Lisa, Sarah noticed something unsettling. She hadn't painted in weeks, her favorite hobby, the one thing that made her feel alive. She hadn't gone to yoga, hadn't called her own mum, hadn't even had time to think about what she wanted. Her life was a revolving door of other people's needs. As she sat in her quiet apartment, staring at her untouched canvas, a question hit her like a lightning bolt. When did I stop being me? That moment of clarity was the first crack in the foundation of her empathic burden. It was the moment she started to feel the weight she'd been carrying without question. Carl Jung would call this the stirring of the self, the core of who you are, beyond the roles you play or the masks you wear. The self doesn't speak loudly, it whispers. For Sarah, it whispered through that question, through the ache in her chest, through the realization that she'd been giving so much of herself that there was little left. This is the hidden burden of the empath. You give until you're empty. And because you're so good at it, no one notices, not even you, until something breaks. So, why does this happen? Carl Jung's concept of the wounded healer archetype offers a clue. Empaths often take on the role of the wounded healer, someone who heals others because they know pain intimately. Maybe you, like Sarah, learned early on that being needed was how you earned love. Maybe you grew up in a chaotic home where you played the peacemaker. Maybe you were praised for being so mature or so selfless, and that became your identity. But Carl Jung reminds us that the wounded healer can only heal others sustainably when they heal themselves first. Without that, the empath's gift becomes a curse, a cycle of self-sacrifice that leaves you depleted. Here's where it gets real. Carrying this burden doesn't just drain you, it distorts your relationships. When you're always the giver, you attract takers. People lean on you because you make it easy. They don't see the toll it takes because you've trained them not to. Sarah realized that Lisa never asked how she was doing. Her colleagues never thanked her for staying late. Her family assumed she'd always be there. No questions asked. This isn't because they're bad people, it's because Sarah, like many empaths, created an unconscious contract. I'll carry your pain if you let me feel needed. But what happens when that contract starts to feel like a cage? That's what we'll explore in the next chapter. The moment an empath wakes up and hears the call to change. For now, ask yourself, have you ever felt like Sarah, giving so much that you lost sight of yourself? Share your story in the comments. We're all on this journey together. Stick around, because we're about to uncover how that weight can become your greatest source of power. Picture this. It's 3 a.m. and you're lying awake, staring at the ceiling, a quiet ache pulsing in your chest. You're not angry, not yet, but something feels off. Deep down, a voice whispers, a voice you've ignored for years, maybe your whole life. It's soft, like a breeze through an open window, but it carries a weight that makes your heart skip a beat. Enough. It's time to choose yourself. This is the awakening moment, the sacred turning point where an empath begins to hear their inner truth. Inspired by Carl Jung's wisdom, this is the moment when the soul demands to be seen. And for empaths like Sarah, it's the first step toward reclaiming their power. For Sarah, our 32-year-old graphic designer, this moment came unexpectedly. Wrapped in a dream, after months of pouring her energy into everyone else, friends, family, co-workers, she had a vivid dream one night. She was in a house, a sprawling maze of rooms filled with people calling her name. Each room held someone needing her, a friend crying, a colleague venting, her mother asking for help. Sarah ran from room to room, her arms outstretched, trying to soothe them all. But then she saw it, a small, late, hidden door in the corner of the house. It was old, covered in dust, almost invisible. She opened it and found a staircase leading down into darkness, with no one calling her, no one needing her. She descended. At the bottom, she saw a mirror. The face staring back wasn't the Sarah who fixed everyone's problems. It was a version of her she barely recognized, tired, but fierce, with eyes that held a spark of something eternal. The reflection whispered, "Come back to me." This dream wasn't just a random nighttime story. It was a message from what Carl Jung called the self. In Carl Jung's psychology, the self is the core of who you are, the totality of your psyche, blending the conscious and unconscious, the light and the shadow. Unlike the ego, which chases approval or survival, the self speaks from a deeper place, guiding you toward wholeness. For empaths, this voice often gets drowned out by the noise of others' needs, but when it stirs, it's impossible to ignore. For Sarah, that dream was the self knocking, saying, "You've given enough. It's time to return to yourself." This awakening doesn't always come with fanfare. It's not a dramatic rebellion or a fiery confrontation. For empaths, it's often quiet, like the first light of dawn creeping over the horizon. Sarah didn't wake up ready to cut people off or scream her frustrations. Instead, she felt a subtle shift, a dissonance between the life she was living and the life her soul craved. She started noticing things she hadn't before: how her friend Lisa's endless crises left her drained, how her co-workers' complaints piled onto her already heavy plate, how her family's expectations felt like chains. For the first time, she asked herself, "Why am I doing this? Who am I when I'm not fixing someone else?" Carl Jung would call this the beginning of individuation, the process of becoming your true, whole self. It's not about rejecting others, but about reclaiming the parts of you that got lost in the act of giving. For empaths, this is a radical act. You've spent so long merging with others' emotions that you might not even know where they end and you begin. But the awakening moment is when you start to draw that line. It's when you realize that compassion without boundaries isn't love, it's self-betrayal. Sarah felt this truth in her bones when she woke up from that dream. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew she couldn't keep living as everyone's emotional anchor. Let's pause for a second and make this real. Think about a time when you felt that quiet nudge inside you. That moment when you realized you were giving too much. Maybe it was after a long phone call where you listened but weren't heard. Maybe it was when you cancelled your plans to help someone, only to feel empty afterward. That nudge, that whisper, is your self speaking. Carl Jung believed these moments often come through dreams, synchronicities, or even a sudden wave of exhaustion that forces you to stop. For Sarah, it was the dream of the hidden door. For you, it might be something else. A song that hits too close to home, a conversation that leaves you hollow, or a moment of silence where you finally hear your own heart. What makes this moment so powerful is that it's not just about saying no to others, it's about saying yes to yourself. Sarah started small. She turned down one of Lisa's late-night calls, letting it go to voicemail. She said no to staying late at work, choosing to go to yoga instead. These weren't loud acts of defiance, they were quiet acts of courage. Each no was a step toward the mirror in her dream, a step toward the version of herself she'd forgotten. Carl Jung would say, this is the self guiding her toward integration, pulling her away from fragmentation and toward wholeness. But let's be honest, this moment isn't all sunshine and clarity. It's terrifying. When you start listening to your inner voice, you risk disrupting the life you've built. Sarah worried that Lisa would be upset, that her colleagues would judge her, that her family would call her selfish. The fear of being seen as not enough or too much is real for empaths. Carl Jung understood this tension. He wrote that the path to individuation often feels like a descent into the unknown. Like walking down that dark staircase in Sarah's dream, you don't know what's waiting, but you know you can't stay where you are. Here's the good news. This awakening is the spark of your revolution. It's the moment you stop being the world's emotional sponge and start becoming the architect of your own life. Sarah didn't have a roadmap, but she had that whisper, that dream, that mirror, and that was enough to start. In the next chapter, we'll dive into what happens when an empath takes that leap, when they walk away. Not out of anger, but out of necessity. But before we go there, let's hear from you. Have you ever had an awakening moment like Sarah's, where you felt your soul calling you back? Drop it in the comments below. And let's keep this journey going together. You felt it that moment when you walk away from a draining relationship, a toxic workplace, or an endless cycle of giving. And you do it without a word, without a fight. It's not a dramatic exit with slammed doors or tearful goodbyes. It's quiet, deliberate, and powerful. For empaths, this silent departure isn't just a choice, it's a revolution, a sacred act of reclaiming your soul. But why does it feel so brutal to those you leave behind? Inspired by Carl Jung's wisdom, let's dive into the empath's quiet exit and why it's the ultimate power move that shakes the world around you. Let's go back to Sarah, our empathic graphic designer. After her awakening moment, the dream of the hidden door and the mirror that whispered for her to return, she started making changes. Small at first, like saying no to her friend, Lisa's late-night calls, or skipping an extra shift to reclaim her evenings. But then came the bigger move. Sarah had been part of a close-knit friend group for years, a circle that leaned on her to mediate conflicts, plan gatherings, and absorb everyone's emotional chaos. One day, after yet another night of playing the group's unofficial therapist, she made a decision. She stopped responding to their group chat. She didn't explain. He didn't apologize. She just stepped back. No drama. No confrontation. Just silence. To Sarah, this felt like survival, a necessary boundary to protect her energy. But to her friends, it was seismic. Lisa texted her, confused. Are you okay? Why aren't you responding? Another friend, Mark, called her distant and selfish in a passive-aggressive voicemail. The group's dynamic unraveled without Sarah's steady presence to hold it together. Why? Because Sarah's quiet exit wasn't just her leaving, it was a mirror held up to everyone else, forcing them to face the truth they'd ignored. They'd been leaning on her for years, taking her emotional labor for granted, without giving back. This is where Carl Jung's concept of the shadow becomes critical. Carl Jung taught that the shadow is the part of ourselves we don't want to see, the flaws, insecurities, or truths we push away. For empaths like Sarah, the shadow often includes the need to be needed, the belief that love comes from being useful. But for those around the empath, their shadow is the dependency they've built on someone else's emotional strength. When Sarah walked away, she removed the crutch. Her absence forced her friends to confront their own shadows, their inability to resolve conflicts without her, their reliance on her to feel okay, their failure to see her as a person, not just a resource. Carl Jung would say, this is the power of the empath's quiet exit. It's not about punishment, it's about clarity. When you stop playing the role of the emotional sponge, You disrupt the unconscious contract you've made with others. I'll carry your pain if you make me feel valued. When that contract dissolves, the people who relied on it are left staring at their own reflection. For Sarah's friends, her silence was deafening because it exposed the imbalance in their relationships. Lisa had to face her own inability to cope without Sarah's constant support. Mark had to deal with his own unresolved anger instead of dumping it on her. The group had to figure out how to function without their invisible glue. Let's make this real with another example. Imagine a workplace where an empath named Alex is the go-to person for everyone's problems. He stays late to help colleagues, takes on extra tasks, and listens to his boss's complaints without ever asking for recognition. One day, after realizing he's burned out and hasn't pursued his own goals in months, Alex quietly stops volunteering for extra work. He doesn't announce it, he just sets boundaries. Suddenly, his team struggles. Deadlines is lip. Tensions rise. And his boss panics because Alex isn't there to smooth things over. Alex's quiet exit didn't just change his life, it revealed the team's over-reliance on him, forcing them to step up or fall apart. This is why Carl Jung's idea of individuation is so powerful here. Individuation is the journey to becoming your whole, authentic self, free from the roles others impose on you. For an empath, the quiet exit is a key step in this process. By stepping back, you're not just saying no to others, you're saying yes to your own needs, your own dreams, your own worth. Sarah's silence wasn't about hurting her friends, it was about honoring herself. Alex's boundaries weren't about abandoning his team, they were about reclaiming his energy. This act of withdrawal is what Carl Jung would call a sacred necessity, a moment when your soul demands space to integrate, to heal, to become whole. But let's be clear, the quiet exit feels brutal to others because it's so unexpected. Empaths are often seen as the always there person, the one who forgives, who fixes, who stays no matter what. When you walk away without explanation, it shatters that illusion. Carl Jung would argue that this disruption is a gift, not a curse. By leaving, you're giving others the chance to face their own shadows, to grow, to find their own strength. It's not your job to carry them through that process. You've done enough carrying. Your absence becomes a mirror, reflecting back what they've avoided. So, what's the takeaway? The empath's quiet exit is your soul's way of saying, I am not here to be your crutch. It's a power move, not because it harms others, but because it liberates you. It's the moment you stop betraying yourself to keep others comfortable. And while it may feel like you're letting people down, you're actually setting yourself free and, in turn, giving others the chance to rise up. Have you ever walked away silently and watched the ripples it caused? Share your story in the comments. Because we're all learning how to step into our power, stay with us. Because in the next chapter, we'll explore what happens after the exit, how the empath transforms and finds peace in the silence. You've walked away. The door is closed. The phone is silent. And for the first time in forever, you're alone with yourself. It's quiet. Maybe too quiet. There's a strange mix of relief and loneliness, like standing in an empty room that used to be full of noise. This is the aftermath of the empath's quiet exit, and it's where the real transformation begins. Inspired by Carl Jung's teachings, this chapter explores what happens after you step back from carrying the world's pain, and how that silence becomes the fertile ground for your soul's rebirth. Let's return to Sarah, our empathic graphic designer. After quietly stepping away from her draining friend group, Sarah felt a shift. At first, it was disorienting. The group chat, once buzzing with demands, went silent. Lisa stopped calling. Mark sent one last guilt-tripping text before fading out. The absence of their voices left a void, and Sarah wasn't sure how to fill it. She'd spent so long being the emotional glue for others that being alone felt foreign, almost wrong. But in that stillness, something new began to stir a spark of herself she hadn't seen in years. One evening, Sarah pulled out her old sketchbook. Untouched for months, she started drawing, not for a client or a deadline, but for herself. The lines flowed freely, and for the first time in ages, she felt alive. She signed up for a yoga class, not because someone needed her to be there, but because she wanted to. She began journaling, pouring out thoughts she'd buried under other people's problems. In one entry, she wrote, "I don't know who I am without helping others, but I'm ready to find out." That was the moment Sarah began to transform, not into someone new, but into the person she'd always been beneath the weight of everyone else's expectations. Carl Jung would call this the heart of individuation, the process of integrating all parts of yourself to become whole. For empaths, the aftermath of a quiet exit is a sacred pause, a chance to turn inward and reconnect with the self. Carl Jung described the self as the center of your psyche, the guiding force that holds both your light and shadow. For Sarah, this meant rediscovering her passions, her voice, and her boundaries. It meant learning to say yes to herself without guilt. In Carl Jung's framework, this is like the alchemical process of transformation, turning the raw, unrefined parts of your psyche into gold. The loneliness Sarah felt wasn't a punishment. It was the crucible where her true self was forged. But let's be real. This phase isn't easy. The aftermath of leaving can feel like standing on the edge of a cliff. Sarah wrestled with guilt. What if Lisa needs me? What if the group falls apart? Am I being selfish? These questions haunted her, especially at night when the silence was loudest. Carl Jung understood this struggle. He wrote that the path to individuation often involves facing the dark night of the soul, a period of doubt, grief, and disorientation as you let go of old identities. For empaths, this means mourning the version of yourself that lived for others, the one who believed love had to be earned through sacrifice. Sarah grieved that version of herself, but she also began to see something else, a stronger, more authentic Sarah, emerging from the ashes. Here's a real moment that changed everything for Sarah. One morning, she stood in front of her bathroom mirror, brushing her hair. When she caught her own reflection, for the first time in years, she didn't look away. She saw the tiredness in her eyes, but also something new, a quiet strength, a spark of joy. She smiled at herself, not for anyone else, but because she felt present. That moment was her alchemical gold, a glimpse of the whole, radiant self. Carl Jung described, it wasn't loud or dramatic, it was a quiet victory, a reclaiming of her own light. So, how do you navigate this aftermath? Carl Jung's teachings offer practical wisdom. First, embrace the loneliness. It's not abandonment. It's space for growth. Sarah used her alone time to rediscover what lit her up: art, yoga, writing. Ask yourself, what did I love before I started carrying everyone else's weight? Maybe it's painting, hiking, or even just sitting quietly with a cup of coffee. These small acts are your soul's way of coming home. Second, set boundaries. Even with yourself. Sarah learned to stop saying yes out of habit. When Lisa texted again, asking for advice, Sarah replied, "I'm here for you, but I need some time for myself right now." It was hard, but it was honest. Third, listen to your dreams. Carl Jung believed dreams are messages from the unconscious, Sarah's dream of the mirror kept recurring, each time showing her a stronger version of herself. Pay attention to your own dreams. They're guiding you toward wholeness. This transformation isn't just about you, it ripples outward. As Sarah began to shine, she noticed changes in her world. New people entered her life. A co-worker who respected her boundaries. A yoga friend who asked about her day. These weren't takers. They were people who saw her for who she was, not what she could do for them. Carl Jung would say, this is the magic of individuation when you align with your true self. You attract relationships that reflect your wholeness, not your wounds. Here's the key takeaway. The aftermath of your quiet exit is where you stop being the world's emotional sponge and start becoming the architect of your own life. It's not about cutting people off or becoming cold. It's about choosing yourself so you can give from a place of strength, not depletion. Sarah's transformation began with small steps, a sketch, a yoga class, a moment in the mirror. Those steps led her to a life where she felt seen, not used. So, ask yourself, what's one small step you can take today to reconnect with your true self? Share it in the comments. We're all in this together. Stick around, because in the next chapter, we'll explore how this new, empowered you becomes a force of nature, radiating strength and peace. You've walked through the silence, faced the loneliness, and rediscovered the spark that makes you, you. Now, standing on the other side of your quiet exit, you're not the same empath who once carried the world's pain. You're stronger, clearer, and more whole, a radiant force who no longer needs to be needed to feel worthy. This is the power of your new self, a transformation rooted in Carl Jung's vision of individuation. In this final chapter, we'll explore how this empowered version of you becomes a beacon of strength, attracting authentic connections and living from a place of unshakable peace. Let's rejoin Sarah, our empathic graphic designer, who's now living a life she never thought possible. After stepping away from her draining friend group and rediscovering her passions painting, yoga, journaling, Sarah began to feel a shift. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was thriving. One day, she launched a small blog to share her sketches and reflections on her journey. To her surprise, strangers started commenting, saying her words resonated deeply. A new friend from her yoga class invited her to collaborate on an art project, not because Sarah could fix something, but because they valued her creativity. For the first time, Sarah felt seen not as a helper, but as a person with her own light to share. This is what Carl Jung would call the emergence of the sovereign self, a state of being where you live, from your own center, not from the expectations of others. Carl Jung believed that individuation, the process of becoming whole, isn't about cutting yourself off from the world. It's about engaging with it authentically, without losing yourself. For empaths like Sarah, this means no longer absorbing everyone's emotions or saying yes to keep the peace. It means choosing who and what deserves your energy. Sarah learned to set boundaries with ease, like politely declining a last-minute request from her old friend Lisa with, "I'd love to catch up, but I'm prioritizing some personal projects right now." Her voice was calm, not apologetic, because she knew her worth didn't depend on being useful. Carl Jung's wisdom shines here through his concept of wholeness. He wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." For empaths, this is revolutionary. You've spent so long merging with others' pain that living from your own truth feels like a rebellion. But it's a quiet rebellion, one that radiates strength. Sarah noticed that as she embraced her new self, her energy shifted. People who once drained her, like Lisa, who thrived on endless crises, faded from her life. In their place came relationships that felt reciprocal, where Sarah could give and receive. Her yoga friend didn't just take, She asked Sarah about her dreams. Her new blog readers didn't demand her time. They shared their own stories, creating a community of mutual growth. Let's ground this in another example. Meet James, an empath who used to be the emotional anchor for his family. He'd drop everything to mediate arguments or support his siblings through every crisis. After his quiet exit setting boundaries by limiting how often he'd step in, James started pursuing his passion for photography. He began sharing his work online. And soon, he was invited to a local gallery exhibit. The people he met there valued him for his art, not his ability to fix their problems. James realized that by choosing himself, he wasn't just healing, he was creating a life where his light attracted others who honored it. So, how do you step into this power? Carl Jung's teachings offer practical steps. First, own your boundaries. They're not walls to keep people out. They're doors that let the right people in. Sarah learned to say no without guilt, trusting that her worth wasn't tied to others' approval. Try it the next time someone asks too much. Respond with kindness, but firmness. Like, I care about you, but I need to focus on myself right now. Second, nurture your passions. What makes your soul sing for Sarah? It was art. For James, it was photography. Reconnect with what lights you up, even if it's just 10 minutes a day. Third, trust the process. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious guides us through dreams and synchronicities. Sarah kept dreaming of that mirror, each time seeing a more confident version of herself. Pay attention to your own signs, they're pointing you toward your true self. This new self isn't just powerful, it's magnetic. When you live from your center, you attract people who see you, not just what you can do for them. Sarah's blog grew because her authenticity resonated. James's gallery invite came because his passion shone through. Carl Jung would say, this is the alchemy of the soul by becoming whole. You transform not just yourself, but the world around you. The takers fade, and the givers, those who respect your boundaries and celebrate your light, step forward. Here's the heart of it. The power of your new self lies in your ability to be, not just to do. You're no longer the empath who sacrifices to be loved. You're a sovereign soul who loves from strength, not depletion. This doesn't mean you stop caring, it means you care enough to protect your own light. So, what's one thing you'll do today to honor your new self? Maybe it's setting a boundary, picking up a forgotten hobby, or simply saying, I am enough. Share it in the comments. We're all cheering for you. Stay with us for the outro, where we'll wrap up this journey with a powerful call to action inspired by Carl Jung's timeless wisdom. And there you have it. The empath's quiet exit isn't just a step away from the chaos. It's a bold leap toward your true, radiant self. Inspired by Carl Jung's timeless wisdom, we've journeyed through the hidden burdens, the awakening moments, and the transformative power of choosing you. Your silence isn't weakness, it's a revolution. A sacred act of reclaiming your soul from a world that took it for granted. As Carl Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. That's your mission now, to shine, to set boundaries, to live from your center. So, what's your next step? Take a moment today to honor your new self, whether it's saying no to a draining request, picking up a passion you've neglected, or simply looking in the mirror and saying, I am enough. We want to hear about it. Drop your story in the comments below. What's one boundary you're setting or one spark you're reigniting? If this video spoke to your soul, hit that subscribe button, tap the bell, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Together, let's build a community of empaths who choose themselves and shine brighter for it. At Young Psyche Hub, we're here to guide you on this journey of self-discovery. Keep shining, keep growing, and we'll see you in the next video.